This episode of Mark My Words is sponsored by the Coatings Alliance, makers of C2 paint. When C2 President Tom Hill asked me my opinion of what would make a program for their super premium wood finish product, Guard, more attractive to dealers, I shared my view that dealers look for three things when they're considering putting new products in their stores. They want a low initial investment. They don't want to have to spend any money on equipment, and they want to know that if the program is not successful, that they can send the product back. And so that's exactly what C2 put together in their program for Guard. I only wish my daughter Buckwheat would listen as well. So if you're interested in hearing more about this program, you can do one of two things. You can go to c2dealer.com to read more, or you can email Tom Hill yourself and ask him any questions you have. That's th4 at c2paint.com. Hey everybody, it's Mark. Thanks for joining me today. Really cool episode for you today. With me today is my Aunt Emily, the only member of my family that I'm aware of, at least that has a wiki page on Wikipedia. So I think she's cool as can be, and I decided to do this episode. You know, I've written a number of times about my Aunt Emily, very unusual person. She's had a remarkable career that, in addition to literally countless hundreds of awards, which are all over her house for various topics, for writing, for screenwriting, for support and help for people with disabilities, the number of things that she's won awards for is unbelievable. But 23 of those hundreds of awards have been Emmy Awards. Be called out as the best in the whole country at what you do. And you know, I talk to paint dealers all the time, and I talk to people that follow me, and people always ask, like, you know, oh, how's Buck doing, or how's Aunt Emily? And so I thought it would be interesting. She's such a dynamite woman with a remarkable career who has literally touched millions of lives with all that she's accomplished. And so, you know, to me, she's just my aunt. So we played casual. I put on my Yankee shirt and cap, which is pretty much how I like to dress anyway. But we just played casual and just had a fun conversation. I have to tell you, I had to edit this more than any other podcast, or I should say I will have to edit this more than any other podcast I've ever done, because usually I record, they're around 40 minutes or so when I cut them off, and then I edit them down to 25 or 30 minutes. In this case, Aunt Emily and I were on the call for well over an hour and 15 minutes. Once we got started, we couldn't stop. No different than any other time when I go over to her house or she comes here or something, that the two of us never shut up. So enjoy meeting her. And, you know, this is something different for me. I've never really brought you guys into my life on a podcast like this before. I've always, you know, really just reserved that for a few jokes in my blog. But, you know, it's interesting to me how many of you sort of follow along, not for the reason I think. I know that there are a great number of you that follow along, not necessarily for the paint. And obviously those readers are not necessarily coming to the podcasts, which are exclusively paint. And so I thought I would give this a shot, and I hope you enjoy it. She's a dynamite woman. And so let me know what you think, like, subscribe, and let me know what you think about my conversation with my aunt, Emily Perl Kingsley. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. With me today is the most special guest that I have ever had on this show before. I am so excited. The only guest that I've ever had that I remember, actually, that's not true. I was about to say the only guest that I ever told I loved, but I did have my father on as a guest. But really fabulous to be here today with my Aunt Emily Perl Kingsley. Aunt Em, how are you today?
I'm fine today. I'm especially
Today.
today. I'm fine. I can't say that every day. I thought I had a doctor appointment at 7 this morning, so I got up at 6. And then when I looked at my book, I found it's not till tomorrow. So I went back to bed for 3 hours.
Very nice. Very
So
nice.
I'm
Very
in
nice.
great shape.
Well, Em, we're going to start with the paint business because this is a paint blog. And
Okay.
even though you weren't born a Lipton, you did sneak into that paint royalty a little bit when you married. Well, you married into originally Tremont Paint when you married my Uncle Chuck Kingsley, right?
Right. That's right. That's
And what do you remember from back then?
1972 we married. I think 72, 72. Long
And
time ago.
and so what do you remember from the paint business, if anything? I know Chuck spent probably 30 years in the paint stores as a painting contractor. Do you remember anything from your time in the paint business?
Well, the first thing that I remember is that he would leave at 4:30 in the morning every day. That
Yeah.
was that was something I definitely had to get used to,
Yeah.
uh, because he would, he had to review all the painters and what jobs had been finished and what hadn't and what needed more paint and how much and where they were going and all that sort of thing. So he was out of the house by 4:45 or something like that in all kinds of weather. um
I remember those days.
oh man.
I remember when I was younger, I so the name of the company that we're talking about, the painting contractor that my uncle, Emily's husband, ultimately ended up owning and buying all their paint from Tremont Paint, my family's business, was J.M. Charles Painting. And I remember, I used to go to the shop at J.M. Charles when I was the truck driver. I'd go every single morning, and you'd be there. You talk about how Chuck would get up at 4:30. We'd be delivering paint to the shop in Elmsford at 6:30.
By 6,
And
right.
so you'd get there at 6:30 with the truck, and there would be 30 painters hanging around. You couldn't unload fast enough because they were all grabbing their crap and trying to get out of there. And then there would be Chuck in the middle of all of that with the clipboard, just trying to
Yeah,
send people in various directions.
get everybody to the correct job with the correct equipment and the correct amount of paint of the right color. And God, and some at
Exactly.
in those days they were painting all of the banks in Westchester County. And
Oh, I remember that.
and banks, for one thing, banks were only open that is, they were closed on the weekends.
Right.
So getting up at 4:30 in the morning wasn't just a Monday to Friday deal. It was very often on the weekends as well, if they
I
were
remember
painting
that.
banks. And they had scaffolding because a lot of these banks were 2 or 3 stories high. And so there are a million funny stories, sad stories, exciting stories. It was a very colorful way to make a living.
Well,
Colorful.
how long did Chuck and my father, Billy, who were brother-in-laws, how long did they work together? Do you know that?
I think the whole time. I mean, it was. Listen, I didn't know all the details, and I wasn't
Right.
part of this, so I wasn't sure how much of it was J.M. Charles and how much of it was Tremont Paint. And
I don't think anybody was sure at some of those times, right?
that is true. But I think it,
So
it evolved that Billy was more in terms of the store.
Yep.
And Chuck was more in the direction of the contracting and the,
Yep.
going out into the world
Yep.
to cover the jobs. Is that
You
correct?
have a good memory. That's exactly how they did it. That is exactly how they did it.
Right.
And so, not being in the paint business, you had a career on your own, and this is one of the regular jokes that I put in my blog all the time. Is you can't walk into your house without tripping over an Emmy award. And so I'd love to start with your time at Sesame Street, because I think that's the foundation for so much of the other work that you've done. So how did you get involved? Tell us a little bit about your career at Sesame Street.
Well, I started at Sesame Street in 1970. So that predates my marriage with Chuck by a couple of years. I was already
Right.
working.
And that was as a writer, right?
As a writer, right. Well, the story is kind of funny because when I was working in television for a whole bunch of years before that, but I was never doing any writing. I had never been a writer for anything, but I had done production, I had done editing, I had done all sorts of different odd jobs in television. And I was working on a game show that got canceled. So I was out of work when Sesame Street came on the air. And I was home. I was able to watch it. There was a lot of promotion, a lot of press about it. And so I watched it and I fell in love and I said, this is where I need to be. It's for kids. It's funny. It has the right kind of attitude. It's trying to make the world a better place, blah, blah, blah. So this was when Sesame first came on. I found out that some of the technicians, the cameramen, lighting guys, that kind of thing, were the same guys as I had worked on a previous job. So I went and I begged them, get me an interview on this show. They got me an interview, but what I found out was that because it was brand new, it had just gone on the air, they were fully staffed. They had everybody they needed. I went, I interviewed in production. They had all the production people. I went to editing. They had all the people they needed in editing. I went to the research department. I had done research on the Dick Cavett show, and they had all of the research people they needed. I went meticulously through every department they had because I would have done anything. I would have swept the floor if they wanted me to. And everybody was fully staffed with everything they needed. I went to the Muppets and I said, I heard they needed somebody to sew the puppets. And I said, let me sew the puppets. I just wanted to get in there somehow. And they said that they heard that they were starting a writer's workshop because it was so difficult to write this stuff, to write curriculum, teaching stuff to 3-year-olds in a certain way. You had to teach the way they said you had to teach, and it had to be 3 minutes long, and it had to be funny, and it had to be understandable by a 3-year-old. So I went,
and there was nobody in this space doing this at the time, right?
Well, they had some writers. They had some writers who were writing.
But I mean, in general, Sesame Street was the first to try to do this, right?
Absolutely, the first, absolutely. And it was very experimental and, very, so I went and I said, please put me on your writer's workshop and teach me how to do this. I'll do anything. So, but I had been watching the show twice a day for 9 months. I had been pestering them for 9 months. And so they let me write some audition material. And after watching them twice a day for 9 months, I knew the show very well. I knew the characters, I knew how they talked, I knew the humor, I knew, so I wrote them a couple of audition pieces. I wrote an Ernie and Bert piece, and I wrote a Kermit the Frog piece. And the 2 audition pieces that I wrote were right on, were just exactly what they needed. So they put me on as a writer right away, even though I had never written anything, truly anything. Wow. So I've been a writer ever since. That is, I've been a Sesame Street writer ever since. And that's 45 years that I stayed with them and kept doing it, kept churning out scripts. And so it was the most wonderful, extremely just ecstatic experience of working on that show.
So you worked with some other really talented people over the years. I know Jim Henson was in your circle early on. Do you want to talk about your time with Jim or any of the other? You worked with some really amazing people over your career.
I was in a state of awe, and I tell you, those 2 audition pieces that I wrote to get into the show in the first place, you can only imagine the thrill of going onto the set and seeing those words that I wrote performed by Jim Henson and Frank Oz, Ernie and Bert together, was an absolute miracle. And I tell you something, there was something about that set that I got the same thrill walking onto that set 45 years later that I did the very first day. There's something very magical about just being there. Everybody who worked on that show had the same vision and had the same dedication to what we were doing. It wasn't just like a job. It was just sort of a way of life. And interestingly, a whole bunch of us, of the early writers from the early days of the show, we still get together once a week on a Zoom to, just be with each other every week, and we chat and laugh.
That's a lot of Emmy awards in the room.
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
we were nominated almost every year. We didn't win every year, but we won a lot of years.
I was going to say 45 years on the show. I'm actually a little disappointed. Only 23 Emmys,
No, I don't know anybody who's got 20.
You're slacking. You're slacking, man. You're slacking. I remember being at your house like 2 years ago. I somehow even recall blogging about this, but we're at your house. We're in the living room, right by the fireplace, and you have that big tree there on the left, and there was something back there that you wanted me to move. I don't remember what it was, but you were like, "Oh, honey, could you do me a favor? Just go back there and, fluff up that pillow for me or something." And so I parked the tree, right? There's that huge tree there. I parked the tree, and son of a gun, sitting there collecting dust for nobody to see was another Emmy award.
There's one. Oops, almost everywhere.
I would think. It's true.
So
you
heavy. Oh my God.
You can't walk without hitting an Emmy award in your house.
It's funny. The first one that I ever got, which was, I guess, maybe for that first year, I was doing a lot of knitting in those days, and I was knitting something with 2 different colors, and I put one ball of wool on this poke and then one ball on the other one, so they wouldn't get all tangled up. So it was very practical.
Put them to good use. Oh,
yeah.
If you're going to have to store 23 Emmys around your house, you might as well keep them functional, right?
Right. Now they're all over the place.
And so that Sesame Street experience is interesting to me because, I create a lot of content, which is what you were doing, making Sesame Street was creating content, right? And how did that, what changed? What happened there that from that experience, you were able to, for 40 years, something grew from that seed that you were able to create content like that at that level for so many years? What inspired you about that was able to do that?
Well, for one thing, just being on the show and being with this group of inspired, hilarious, funny, talented people was, it would energize you every single day. And
back then, when you were working for them,
difficult. Yeah,
you were on the set, right? When you were
I was working. I was writing at home. And you would get an assignment sheet, which would tell you you were responsible for a single show all by yourself, and it would tell you all the things that you were supposed to teach in that show. So what your letter of the day, you had the letter W, or you had the number of the day, you had to write something about the number 9, or, whatever it happened to be. And it told you which cast members you were to write for, who would be available that day. And it told you what your relational concept of the day was: up, down, near, far, loud, soft, whatever. You would be assigned one of those, and you were supposed to write on that topic. So you had a whole bunch of topics that you had to cover in a certain show. It was very difficult and very challenging.
I have no doubt at all that you were a great writer to be able to do that. And I have no doubt that doing it for so long made you a great writer as well.
Sometimes it helped, and sometimes you were completely blocked and couldn't, you just said, there's nothing else in the whole world that you can say about the letter W. Everything about it has already been said, and that's it.
I'll tell you something you could say about the letter W, which is something that you never did on Sesame Street, and that is, thank God it's not the letter X. Right?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story about that. And at one point when they decreased the number of shows that we were doing. We were originally doing 120 shows, which is 6 months worth of shows around, 5 days a week. Then because of funding and because of all kinds of problems, so we went down to 93 shows a year. Then we went down to 60 shows a year, or 50 shows a year. And then finally, the last cut was to 26 shows a year. And we were thinking that we had a wonderful time one day when we were talking about if it had been 25 shows a year and they had to throw out one letter of the alphabet,
Right.
who would be the one who was assigned to calling up the letter F and saying,
Yes.
"Listen, I'm terribly sorry. You're out."
Fabulous.
And we know what the letter F would have said back to us. So
Yeah,
fortunately,
I'm
we didn't
sure.
have that. But I'll tell you, Alanta, I want to answer your question seriously in a way, because a couple of years later, 2 years after I started with Sesame Street, in 1974, my son Jason was born. Your cousin Jason. And Jason was born with Down syndrome, which meant that he had a condition which, and in the beginning, when he was first born, the doctors gave us some very, very negative advice, told us that he would never do anything, he'd never read, he'd never write, he'd never accomplish anything. It was very, very frightening. And we were scared to death. But, we decided to bring him home and give him the most enriched environment and enhanced stimulation and so on that we could, and see what we could get out of him. And it turned out when he was about 3, it was apparent that he was really bright, that he was not this, sort of vegetable that they had predicted, but he was really understanding things. He was learning things. And at 3, he started putting letters together. He started making little words out of the Scrabble tiles. And he started reading the letters off the headline of a newspaper. And we said, holy cow, this kid is going to read. And then we realized that there were no kids like this on television. You never saw a kid with any kind of a disability, and certainly not a cognitive disability.
Back then, not just were there no disabled people on television, but there weren't a lot even in sort of life in Westchester.
In the world.
Right? It was not unusual back then for people like Jason to spend their lives in some sort of institutional setting, because society didn't have the patience and the tolerance for people that were different.
That's right. And there were all kinds of stereotypes and misinformation and all that kind of thing. And so here I have this kid who's starting to read, and I work on Sesame Street. I said, maybe we can put these two things together. So I went to the producers. I said, I've got a 3-year-old kid. He's got Down syndrome, but he's starting to read. He's doing the very stuff that Sesame Street is doing. He's learning the things that we're teaching. It's extraordinary. Can I put him on the show? So they said, sure, why not? Let's try it. And we put Jason, little Jason, he was 3. He was so cute. He was so adorable.
I remember.
And he was doing, stuff with Cookie Monster, he did D is for, and they opened up a little picture. He says, doggy. And it says, D is for dog. And, what does the doggy say? He says, woof. And it was so cute. But it demonstrated to the world that a kid with Down syndrome could do academic stuff. It was
you demonstrated for the world.
Well, Jason did, but I put him there.
Jason.
Yeah, yep. Right. So the mail that came in, and as a matter of fact, this is interesting that yesterday I was up working in my office going through some old files. I found a file folder full of thank you letters that people had sent in those early days when Jason was on showing what he could do. And he was so little, and these letters just blow your mind. I never knew that my kid was capable of this kind of thing. I'm going to work harder with my kid from now on, that kind of thing. It was just extraordinary. And people saying, I never saw a kid like this, on television before. It's so refreshing to see a kid like my kid, and you want to be recognized. You want to just whatever it is that you are, whether it's racial or ethnic or in this case disability, they were never seen in the regular ordinary community. And I had all these letters that people sent. So I showed all these letters to the producers, and I said, this is a huge success. And we, why just limit it to Jason? Let's try some other kids. So we started with wheelchairs. We started with braces. We started with crutches and with helmets and with all, and that became the trademark of my career. And for the rest of my 45 years,
Yeah.
that's what I specialized in. I
Yes.
specialized in not only showing people with disabilities, but we did some real explanation of stuff. I mean, you know how people, they have a kid and they say to the kid, don't look, don't stare, don't point, don't. And I said, no, that's all wrong. That's all wrong. What we want is for kids to ask their questions. They have a lot of questions. Why is this person using a wheelchair? So let's ask those questions. Let's answer those questions and give them a little, and take away some of the strangeness, take away some of the fear. We put Linda Bove, who was profoundly deaf, and she was on the show for 30 years. And we not only showed her, how do you wake up in the morning? And she explained how she has an alarm clock with a light that blinks off and on and wakes her up in the morning. Or how do you know when there's somebody at your door? How do deaf people have a doorbell? And we answered these questions. It was just great. And mostly, we just showed her as a regular, ordinary member of the community, just
Right.
having friends and doing ordinary things. So that was, that was the trademark of what I was doing.
And I remember at the time, you and Chuck were very involved in School for the Deaf. And so it was not just as a writer at Sesame Street where you sort of made your name as an advocate for people with disabilities. Do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the other things that you did? Because before you start, I remember you even fostering kids, like when their families were sort of in over their heads with a recent diagnosis. I remember how you advocated for people with disabilities. So I'd love to hear some of that.
Okay, well, number one, the first thing that you were referring to is that Chuck and I would go and talk at schools, at medical schools, at nursing schools. We would take Jason along with us to demonstrate all kinds of things that he could do. When he was 7, he was reading pretty comfortably at that point. And if you go to a medical school and you're talking to 220 doctors, obstetricians, who are about to go out into the world and give the same stupid negative advice to other mothers.
That you had gotten, right?
That's right, exactly the terrible stuff that we were told. And you show them, here's this real life kid who can read. He was reading signs off of the wall that he could not otherwise, have pre-learned, or he was doing some math on the blackboard. And at 7, he was counting to 10 in 12 different languages. It was just a game, but he loved it. And he could count in Russian and in Swedish and in Japanese. And for him to demonstrate that sort of thing to 220 obstetricians, it was dynamite. It was so exciting. So we would go and give these lectures to anyone who'd stop long enough to listen to us. We had a great time. It was very, very exciting. And Jason loved it too. It made him feel very good about what he had accomplished. And it was lots of fun. We did that for years.
And started him on a path, started him individually on a path that would be very different from just about anybody else born with Down syndrome. Because Jason, I know you mentioned a second ago, when he was 7, he could count to 10 in 12 different languages, but Jason is no parlor trick. You're his mother. Jason is a published author. Jason has been in movies. So you started him on a path that would have been impossible, frankly, with just about anybody else by his side.
You have to be very careful. You have to be very careful when you talk about that stuff, because Jason is I hesitate to say extraordinary, but he has a lot of very extraordinary, flashy skills, counting to 12 in 7 languages. No, counting to 10 in 12 languages. It's not a very useful skill. It's not something you're ever going to make any money at, but it's very impressive, and it blows people's minds. Okay. But what you have to never forget is that he's got a disability. He learns more slowly. He,
Yep.
when he was about 8 years old, the rest of the world caught up with him and passed him in the dust. The other 8-year-old kids were reading like crazy. Yeah, he could read, but he wasn't reading like ordinary 8-year-olds. And I had a whole second crash of sharing with you and everybody that I had to realize that this is a kid with a disability who's doing as well as he can. He's doing remarkable, wonderful, terrific things. But there are an awful lot of things that he has a lot of trouble with and that he's always going to have a lot of trouble with. And so I would never want to communicate to people that we licked it or that it went away or there was no problem or anything like that. This has been a disability that's been with him his entire life. When he became an adult and we thought perhaps he might be able to live independently in an apartment, and we tried.
And Jason is 45 or 6
46
now, right?
now, yeah.
Yeah, right.
But it was apparent that, he had a lot of real deficits that made it impossible for him to live truly independently. He's now in a very small group home with 2 roommates and with part-time staff. But it was apparent after a lot of tears and a lot of frustration that the disability is real, and I would never want to try to imply to people that even if you give your kid a tremendous amount of education and stimulation and everything else, that you're going to make all this go away. He's always going to have Down syndrome, and that's just part of who he is. And who he is a pretty terrific guy. He's funny, he's sensitive, he's imaginative, and but he's not able to live all by himself. So that's, there are things that you have to accept and things that you have to, and that's not easy. That's very difficult to do.
And so I think I was actually going to leave this for later in the conversation, but I think this is the right time. So that experience as a parent, and anybody who's listening to this, who's got children, can empathize, with that experience, with 45 years of sort of always having to be there because things are not going to go the way they often go with other people. And I don't know what the proper term is there with people who are ordinarily abled, I guess. Is that the right term?
Yeah, but typically developing, or
typically developing. And so as a parent, I know that experience moved you, and as a writer, I know that you created something that has had a very lasting effect on this community. And so I want to talk a little bit about Welcome to Holland.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Welcome to Holland is a very short essay that I wrote a long time ago in 1987. I was actually...
So Jason would have been around 10 or 11 when you wrote this, right?
Let's see, he was born in 74, so he was
12,
13,
okay.
Yeah. Right. The idea of Welcome to Holland is, I was speaking to a new mom who had just had a new baby, and I was sitting on her bedside at the hospital and was trying to explain to her what this experience is all about. So what I said to her was that it's sort of like you're planning a trip to Italy. You're going to take a vacation to Italy, and you're going to go to the Colosseum, and you're going to go to the Vatican Museum, and you're going to go see the Michelangelo David, and you're going to go ride in a gondola, and you go and you buy a bunch of guidebooks, and you study up on, what you're going to do, and you go to Berlitz and you learn some phrases in Italian, and you make your preparations, all very exciting. So 9 months later, you're ready, and the plane takes off, and it lands, and the flight attendant comes in and says to you, "Welcome to Holland." And you say, "Holland? What are you talking about, Holland? I'm supposed to be in Italy. My entire life I've planned to go to Italy." And she says, "Well, there's been a change of plans, and we've landed in Holland, and that's where we've got to stay." And the point is that it's not a disgusting, filthy place with pestilence and plague and rats. And so it's just a different place. It's a little bit slower paced than Italy. It's a little bit less flashy than Italy. But when you've been there a while, you got to buy a whole bunch of new guidebooks. You got to learn a whole new phrases in another language. You meet a whole bunch of people that you would never have met otherwise. But after you've been there for a while and you look around and you catch your breath, you realize that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulips. And, you even run into a Rembrandt once in a while. But if you are so busy, all the people are busy coming and going from Italy. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yeah, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. That's what everybody's bragging about what a great time they're having in Italy. And you say, well, yeah, that's what I had hoped and had planned for, but I'm in Holland. And if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may not be available to appreciate the sometimes very lovely and interesting and different things about Holland. So, okay, that's this piece, Welcome to Holland, that I wrote. And since then, Welcome to Holland has just exploded. It's all over the world, and it's become a kind of a mantra for people going through this experience of getting used to having a kid who's different.
How many times has it been published, Em?
Oh my God, I can't possibly know that. It's hundreds.
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, right?
I have hundreds of books upstairs in my library where it's been reprinted. I have it in about 14 different languages. People write to me from all over the world asking to reprint it. And I just got a request the other day from Australia.
At 40 years since you wrote it, I think you had mentioned just recently you actually had to put up a website for it because
I have a website now where it is.
Yeah.
Because people, are contacting me so often to reprint it. So
So I would Google that if you're listening to this podcast and you're interested in a really reading a piece of writing that changed people.
People carry it around in their wallets and put it on their kitchen refrigerators. It's everywhere. It's wild. There's a website you just look up www.emilyperlkingsley.com. There's no A in Pearl, Perl. And that's my website. And you'll find Welcome to Holland and a whole lot of cute pictures of Muppets. Nice pictures of me with Ernie and Bert and the two-headed monster and cows and stuff like that.
How has it changed you, do you feel, as a writer, once you create something as unique as Welcome to Holland and you recognize I've really created something special with words? Does that change you at all as a writer? Other than daunting. I'm sure you were proud of it, obviously.
It's very, very gratifying to know that people recognize it and people utilize it and share it and so on. It's really wonderful. It's really wonderful. One of the things that happened to me is that you get a kind of a disability mindset and you realize that it isn't just Down syndrome or it isn't just an intellectual disability. It's anybody, and everybody has certain challenges that they have to meet. There are some challenges that I'm grateful I'm not going to have to meet. Jason, with all of his challenges or with all of his whatever he has or he doesn't have, he will never steal a car.
Right.
He will never have a drug problem. I mean, there are certain things that a lot of parents of ordinary, typical developing kids have to deal with that I am blessedly relieved from. On the other hand,
well, he never got a woman pregnant, but I think he could have. So you still had that worry.
Well, there's a lot of controversy about that. Not about Jason, but all of the literature says that men with Down syndrome are not fertile, that they have a very low sperm count, and so they are considered to be incapable of causing a pregnancy. However, and this is an issue with me, all of those studies were done years and years ago, And if you read the literature, if you read books from 40, 50 years ago, it'll say that all these guys are infertile. But no studies have been done on the sperm counts of these new guys, this new generation of guys who were raised at home, who went to regular schools, who are in the
Right.
Special Olympics, who had exercise and good nutrition. Who knows what their fertility is nowadays? And I'm dying for some scientist to do a study on that. Okay.
But I wanted to talk to you a little bit. You don't even know the term cosplay, I don't think.
What's that?
Cosplay is a term that a lot of the kids are using, and so the big thing is to dress up as a character and live your life as that character. So if you're a Star Wars fanatic, a lot of the kids today that are into cosplay, they'll dress up as Han Solo and spend the day walking around as Han Solo. And you have a dirty little secret. I know you do some cosplay, don't you?
Well, Jason has fallen in love.
I'm not talking about Jason.
No, me?
I'm talking about you. I'm talking about your Gilbert and Sullivan group.
Oh, yes. I happen to be a very big fan of the comic operas of Gilbert and Sullivan. And I love to sing, and I don't sing very well, but I love to sing, and I love to sing Gilbert and Sullivan. So I got a group together that meets once a month to sing the operas of Gilbert and Sullivan. And all of us are a little bit wacky, and we're a little bit nerdy, but we all love Gilbert and Sullivan. We love dressing up as Gilbert and Sullivan characters when we have.
By the way, if you
Yes.
want to ever save some words, be more efficient, you can just tell people you love Gilbert and Sullivan, and then you don't have to say that you're nerdy.
They know that
just
already.
Assumed, right? They just assume it after that, right? So if you just want to be more efficient, there's more to the Gilbert and Sullivan. I mentioned cosplay because there's more to this story than just a bunch of old people getting together once a month and singing some songs that are even older than them.
Yeah.
You have the basement of your house is enormous. It's probably 2,000 square feet, thereabouts. Maybe not that big, but it's close. And you built a stage down there, and you have a closet, an enormous closet filled with costumes.
Yes, people love to come to my house to get, it's the best dress up closet in the world.
Yes.
And, when we do the Gilbert and Sullivan operas once a month, we just dress them up a little bit with pirate hats or, English bobby hats or mustaches or, feather boas or whatever, just sort of makes it a little bit more festive. So kids love to come and play at my house and play in the dress up closet. It's a wonderful.
I'm going to post with this. I'm going to post some videos of Miranda and her friends playing downstairs in your basement.
Great. That's great.
I have shots of them on the stage. I have shots of them in costumes singing.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. You got with the Japanese stuff from the Mikado.
Everything. It's all down there.
That's great.
I got some fabulous videos.
Yeah, it's something I love very much, and it gives me a lot of pleasure, a lot of joy, and it's been fun for a lot of people to have during the COVID crisis. Of course, we've had to shut down, and we have not been able to get together for a year. So I'm hoping that soon we'll be able to start having our monthly meetings again. But we have gotten together on Zoom, and even though we can't really sing a whole opera on Zoom, we play Gilbert and Sullivan trivia games, and we play Pictionary, and we have a lot of fun getting together just because we have this interest that we share. So it's a lot of fun. But I thought you were referring to Jason is mad about Disney animated movies. He is. Yes,
I'm aware.
He could be the archivist for the Disney Corporation. He knows every date and every, you ask him, when was Bambi first released? He'll tell you the day and the week, and, he knows everything. But when Frozen came out, Jason fell madly in love with Elsa from Frozen. And that has, occupied his fantasy life for 6 years.
Yep.
And so he has a lot of stuff. Maybe he got this from me, but he's got a lot of stuff in his room with little, crowns and statues and photos and whatnot in homage to Elsa. And he's writing a second book now. He wrote one book. I should show it to you. I should get it and hold it up. The first book he wrote with his pal Mitchell Levitz, who also has Down syndrome. That
I
book,
remember Mitchell.
that was called Count Us In, Growing Up with Down
Yep.
Syndrome. It's a super
Yep.
wonderful book. It's all about their feelings about all kinds of topics, about politics and religion and science and school and family and all sorts of things, girls and sex and whatnot. It was a great, great book. And it was entirely in their own words. Nothing was fixed and nothing was corrected for syntax or anything. So here it is all these years later, and he's writing. It turns out that when Frozen came out about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever it is, and he fell in love with Elsa, he started keeping a diary. And he has been journaling every day since that time. So he's now filled up 19 volumes of his
Wow.
thoughts and his innermost feelings. And so I'm devoted and determined to make it into a book. It's just wonderful. His writing is imaginative and funny and interesting.
Well, he's funny because his mother is funny.
Well, we had a lot of laughs growing up. We sure did. He's a very funny guy. Yes. We have a new baby in our family. And when I told Jason that this new baby had been born, it's a new nephew for him. And he said to me, "What is the baby's name?" And I said, "The baby's name is Rhodes." And he says, no, where we're going, we don't need no damn roads. I thought that was so perfect, just like that. He had that line from Back to the Future right there. No, we don't need no damn roads. So he's a very, very funny and literate kind of guy. So,
and what can I say? Our conversations are always fabulous to me. It's why I keep showing up at your house all the time and talking for hours at a time. And so we got, unfortunately, I could talk to you for hours, but there are some limitations. We don't want this to go for too long. Any final words that the only member of my family with a wiki page wants to share with paint dealers around the United States?
Oh, well, I mean, it's been a blessing to have you in my life, obviously, and I love you so much, and Miranda,
too,
of
Emily.
course. And but just, I mean, what I would just say to people in general is that you just have to do what you can with what you got. You know, it doesn't pay to weep a lot about what you didn't get, when you could be spending time making the most of what you did get. Of course, not everything is going to be perfect, and there are going to be challenges and there are going to be letdowns, and that's just the way it is. It's just what you get is what you get. And I'm immensely proud of Jason. I'm proud of the body of work that I produced. I think that if it was helpful to people, I'm really, really glad. It's been a good run. I'm
23
81.
Emmys.
I just turned 81. I can't believe that. I can't accept it, really. But I hope we got a whole lot more steam going for a whole lot more fun to have.
Oh yeah. But 23 Emmys, that's a calling card right there. And I've said this to you before. I know that the 10 Commandments say, "Thou shalt not covet," but I think I've been clear. We don't want to wait till after you're gone, Em, to find out that I'm the 24th person that you love the most on this planet. Right? So I think you know what I'm telling you.
They're all in my will. It's all written down.
All right, Em. Well, Emily Perl Kingsley, my Aunt Emily, what a great experience this has been for me, and I've loved it so very much.
It's always a joy to talk to you, and this has been
and it
great.
Sounds like I'm going to see you next week. You're going to text me when we get done here. Text me the date that you need me, and I'm happy to take you to the doctor.
All right, we'll talk about that, and I hope to see you real soon. And My love to you and all of your extended people.
Thanks. All righty. I'll talk to you soon. I love you.
Okay. This is I love you in sign language.